specifically for you.
Yeah, we're really thrilled you're joining us today.
We have a single, highly focused piece of source material sitting in front of us right now. And depending on where you are, sitting in your career at this moment, this might feel like a bit of a wake-up call.
Oh, absolutely. It's an infographic, though. Calling it that feels a bit reductive, honestly.
It really does. It reads much more like a blueprint, or maybe even a mandate for surviving the current iteration of the modern workforce.
Yeah, the title at the very top, it does not pull any punches. It says, Elevate Your Professional Profile, 3 Critical Steps for a Regenerative Future.
Okay, let's unpack this right out of the gate, because that phrasing carries a ton of weight.
Yeah.
Regenerative future.
It does. It implies we are moving way past the era of mere sustainability or, just harm reduction. It signals an economic landscape where the expectation is active renewal. The stakes presented here go far beyond just tweaking the font on a cover letter or optimizing your search keywords.
Definitely. This document is outlining a fundamental shift in how human capital is actually evaluated.
I mean, to really grasp the gravity of this, we need to look at the contextual details anchored at the very bottom of the document.
The copyright date.
Exactly.
Yep.
It carries a copyright of 2025.
Right, and furthermore, as you scan the specific steps, the document explicitly states it uses practices in 2025 as a benchmark.
And sitting here firmly in 2026, looking at a guide that uses last year as the foundational benchmark.
It completely changes the entire dynamic.
It really does. This isn't some theoretical white paper predicting what might happen in a decade. It is telling you that the transition period is already underway.
The actions you took in 2025 are already locked in as your baseline.
Utilizing 2025 as a benchmark forces this, sudden retrospective audit. It means the grading rubric for professionals officially changed while many people were still playing by the old rules.
Yeah, if your benchmark is already established, the urgency completely shifts from preparing for the future to, catching up to the present.
Catching up to the present, yes. Because this document promises a direct transition into the regenerative economy, and it lays out a very specific 3-step pipeline to get there.
So let's look at the very first step in this new rubric, which the document boldly titles the one-day profile makeover.
A one-day timeline for pivoting your entire professional identity into a regenerative framework.
It seems wildly optimistic, almost anxiety-inducing, honestly.
No, it's terrifying. And the source is explicit about the venue for this makeover. It points directly to your LinkedIn profile or personal resume.
It even has a little icon of the LinkedIn logo and an arrow pointing to a document.
Right, and the actionable advice here is entirely focused on the text. It instructs you to add dynamic new paragraphs.
But those dynamic paragraphs have a very specific burden to bear.
They do. The infographic states they must be showcasing your future-ready leadership narrative.
We really need to pause and dissect the rhetorical shift happening there, because a traditional resume is inherently a historical ledger.
Yeah, it's a bulleted list of past quotas hit, teams managed, budgets balanced.
It looks backward.
Exactly. This step, however, is demanding a narrative that proves forward-facing utility.
It's like driving by looking out the windshield instead of the rearview mirror, but with the added pressure of having to narrate the scenery before you even arrive.
That is a perfect analogy. It makes you wonder how a professional is supposed to condense a decade of traditional extraction-based corporate experience into a future-ready story over the course of a single afternoon.
It would require a complete translation of your past skills.
In the context of a regenerative future, the traditional metrics of simply generating shareholder value might be viewed as archaic, or worse, a liability.
Yeah, the document is basically arguing that you need to reframe your entire career arc to prove you can lead in a completely new economic paradigm.
You are no longer just an employee filling a role. The expectation is that you are an active participant in this regenerative economy.
And the visual context they provide for step 1 really drives home the sheer scale of what they're asking of you.
Oh, the globe graphic.
Yes. Right below the text, there's an illustration of an Earth globe. It's wrapped in thick dual arrows, one green and one orange, circling the planet.
It looks like the universal browser refresh button, but wrapped around the entire world.
What's fascinating here is the audacious juxtaposition of scale.
Yeah, the source takes a mundane administrative task.
Like updating a few paragraphs of text on a LinkedIn page.
Right, and visually equates it with global planetary renewal.
By putting that globe and those refresh arrows directly inside step 1, the infographic elevates a basic career chore into an act of global participation.
It frames your personal, individual rebrand as the foundational building block of a massive worldwide shift.
It essentially tells the listener that their career trajectory and the planet's trajectory are intrinsically linked.
Which is a heavy burden to place on a resume update.
But if writing a future-ready narrative feels like a heavy lift, Step 2 abandons the realm of persuasive writing entirely and moves into hard metrics.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Step 2 is titled the Individual ESG Personal Report.
This right here is the absolute core of the paradigm shift. This is where the subjective narrative from step 1 collides with objective quantification.
The document reiterates that this report must be based on practices in 2025 as a benchmark. So your baseline year is already generating the data.
And then there is a very clear directive with a downward pointing arrow that says plus added into the profile.
But the visualization of this concept is what really stops you in your tracks.
It really does. The infographic provides a mock-up of what your new professional profile should look like.
There is a silhouette of a person, just a standard headshot placeholder.
But prominently displayed right next to their face, running alongside their text blocks, are a pie chart and a bar graph.
I mean, we are all deeply familiar with corporate ESG reports. We're used to seeing massive institutions publish their supply chain emissions, their board diversity metrics, their community impact scores.
Right, and investors use those massive data sets to determine if a conglomerate is responsible enough to warrant capital.
But applying that massive institutional framework to a single human being's profile, that is a radical miniaturization of corporate compliance.
It takes a framework meant for multinational conglomerates and forces it onto you, the individual knowledge worker.
By instructing you to add an individual ESG personal report to your profile, complete with personal pie charts and bar graphs, it is turning your daily professional existence into a tradable commodity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the implications of step 2 are staggering.
They really are.
It implies an unprecedented level of surveillance and quantification of the individual. Your future readiness isn't just a nicely written dynamic paragraph anymore.
It's a hard number. It's data.
And by using 2025 as a benchmark, the underlying assumption is that this data is already being generated by your actions, whether you are consciously tracking it or not.
You are simply being told to capture it, format it, and display it prominently next to your headshot for recruiters to judge.
Can you imagine the actual realities of this in a hiring scenario?
Oh, man. Instead of an employer trying to gauge if you are a culture fit during an interview, they are simply analyzing the bar graph of your social governance.
Or instead of reading a bullet point about how you implemented efficiencies, they are scrutinizing a pie chart of your personal environmental footprint from your last role.
It completely changes the power dynamic of a job application.
It creates a scenario where personal habits and professional value are indistinguishable.
Like if your personal ESG bar graph dips because of the projects you were assigned or the commuting habits you had in 2025, does that make you unemployable in a regenerative economy?
The subjective human element of hiring is basically being replaced by the cold, hard data of a planetary audit shrunk down to the size of a LinkedIn widget.
That level of exposure is intimidating. I mean, if you are going to make grand claims in your dynamic paragraphs, and if you are going to publicly display these highly personal data charts, the market is going to demand verification.
You cannot just invent a pie chart and expect a hiring manager to trust it.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final phase. Step 3, chart your career compass.
The navigational metaphor is super fitting here. You have constructed the narrative, you have visualized the data, and now you need the institutional validation to prove you are actually heading in the right direction.
The destination of this compass is highly specific. Step 3 introduces the ISO 18024 Competent Person Certificate.
Now, the visual contrast in this section is brilliant.
It really is. After the sleek, modern Earth graphics of Step 1 and the futuristic, quantified data dashboards of Step 2, Step 3 pivots hard into traditionalism.
We see an incredibly old-school, formal certificate.
It has the classic ornate borders, cursive writing declaring certificate competent, a prominent reference to the ISO 18024 standard.
And at the very bottom, a literal ribbon secured with a gold wax seal.
The irony of using an industrial-era standardization process to validate something as fluid and modern as future-ready regenerative leadership is palpable.
We are talking about a totally new, rapidly evolving global economy. We are talking about the radical concept of personal ESG pie charts.
These are completely untested waters for the typical professional.
Yet the anchor for all this radical newness is a piece of paper with a wax seal.
By anchoring this final step with the visual of an old-school formal certificate, the source is injecting a massive dose of traditional validation into a highly disruptive process.
It is reassuring the listener. It says, yes, personal ESG data is a new, slightly terrifying frontier, but your participation in it is backed by recognized, standardized, unshakable authority.
The traditional certificate lends immense gravitas to the modern data.
It is bridging the psychological gap between the old world of work and the new. It allows you to say, I'm a pioneer of the regenerative future, but I have the traditional bureaucratic paperwork to prove it.
Also, let's look at the specific language of that certificate. It doesn't say exceptional person or innovative leader. It says competent person.
Right. ISO standards are essentially about establishing a baseline of quality and consistency. They don't measure brilliance, they measure compliance.
Calling it a competent person certificate strips away the ego usually associated with professional branding.
It suggests that in the regenerative economy, simply reaching the baseline of competence regarding these new metrics is the primary hurdle.
The infographic does a fantastic job of synthesizing all of this complexity right below the certificate. There is a tidy summary of everything required of you, capped with a large check mark.
It reads, new paragraphs, ESG report, certification.
Boom, boom, boom. The holy trinity of the 2026 professional profile.
It distills the overwhelming anxiety of a changing global economy down to 3 actionable deliverables.
Providing a clear, unambiguous checklist is a highly effective way to drive compliance.
But the document does not just leave you isolated with your checklist. The bottom section of the infographic fundamentally shifts the tone from individual burden to collective action.
Up until this point, the focus has been intensely personal. Your profile, your data, your certificate.
But the final visual portrays a diverse group of 4 professionals sitting around a table.
They are deeply engaged, pointing at a laptop screen together.
It suggests that while this is an individual rebrand, you are not expected to navigate it in a vacuum.
The regenerative economy, by its very definition, cannot function in isolation.
The visual implies that figuring out how to write these new paragraphs, how to properly generate these personal ESG reports, and how to study for these certifications is a collaborative effort.
It frames the transition as a community-driven imperative, rather than just a solitary race for a job.
That collaborative spirit naturally leads into the final functional elements of the source. Sandwiched right next to our group of professionals is a large, prominent QR code.
And to ensure there's no confusion about its purpose, the words sustainable profile are arched over the top of it.
The QR code itself is framed by green arrows wrapping around it, perfectly echoing the recycling and planetary refresh imagery we saw back in step 1.
It visually ties the final action you take right back to the initial premise of global renewal.
The QR code serves as a literal portal out of the document. You are analyzing a static infographic, but the code demands immediate physical interaction.
It invites you to pull out your phone, scan the code, and bridge the gap between passively reading about this economic shift and actively participating in it.
And if the QR code is somehow too subtle, the call to action placed directly next to it leaves absolutely zero room for misinterpretation.
In bold, commanding letters, it says, "Take action now."
Directly beneath that, formatted in brackets to simulate a clickable button, it reads, "Click here, Google Form."
There's something incredibly jarring about that.
Isn't there? We have spent this entire deep dive discussing global planetary shifts, the radical quantification of human capital, international ISO standardization.
And the gateway to all of this profound change is a standard Google form.
It highlights the accessibility and perhaps the mundanity of the transition.
The concepts driving the regenerative economy are vast, complex, and deeply philosophical. But the physical mechanism for entering that economy is as simple and familiar as filling out a web form.
It violently lowers the barrier to entry, removing any excuse the listener might have for delaying their participation.
So let's synthesize what we've uncovered for you today. The source material presents a clear 3-stage pipeline to force your career into what it calls a regenerative future.
Step 1 demands you abandon the past tense resume and construct a future-ready leadership narrative through dynamic new paragraphs.
Step 2 requires a massive paradigm shift, asking you to attach a personal ESG data report using 2025 as your benchmark directly onto your public profile.
And step 3 requires you to validate all of this modern data with an old-school ISO 14024 competent person certificate.
New paragraphs, ESG report, certification. So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
It means the professional landscape has been fundamentally re-engineered.
The urgency of adapting to these new standards is not a distant future problem you can put off. The copyright is 2025. We are operating in 2026.
The transition is currently underway. You are already generating the benchmark data, and the tools to adapt are sitting right in front of you.
This raises an important question.
Actually, that is exactly the point I was about to make. This raises an incredibly important question, and it hinges entirely on the very last line of the source material.
Right at the foundation of the image, the final tagline reads, "Rebrand your profile. Regenerative economy starts with you."
It explicitly places the burden, the origin, and the responsibility of this massive economic shift squarely on the shoulders of the individual.
So if the regenerative economy truly does start at the individual level and requires personal ESG benchmarks and specific ISO competency certificates,
How long will it be until these exact metrics completely replace traditional job experience as the sole deciding factor in who gets hired? I mean, will there come a day, perhaps much sooner than any of us are prepared for, where hiring managers completely ignore where you went to school, what your previous title was, or how many years you worked in a field, and solely base their decisions on the pie charts and bar graphs of your personal planetary impact?
that is a staggering reality to consider the next time you log in to update your LinkedIn profile. It forces you to look at your daily professional habits through a highly quantified, uncompromising lens.
Thank you for sharing this incredible piece of source material with us and for joining us on this custom deep dive.
We hope it provided the exact insight you need to navigate the complexities of this regenerative future. Until next time, keep learning, keep adapting, and take care.